So Giant's Grave. Should really take this opportunity to introduce myself. Hang on, turn the camera around. Hi! What a glorious day. Just thought it'd be really nice to make this film because we're having a Zoom talk, and I'll be honest, I'm not a massive fan of Zoom. I like getting out in the landscape, so I thought this was a really nice happy medium. And so I'm Helen. I can explain myself further in person on Zoom. But we're starting our journey up Greencombe, so we're looking at the whole landscape. But I wanted to take you to two places that we usually, well, they're less visited. So one in particular, Church Hill, and then we'll touch on Giant's Grave, and we'll go up to Tooth Cave at the back. So hopefully you'll really enjoy it. And thanks for having me. Thanks for your interest in what I've been doing. So I'm at the entrance to Giant's Grave. Now it's pouring with rain, which is nice in the sense that there's nobody here. But it also means I was going to show you some documents and artifacts on site, but I can't do that. But at least, you know, we can have a look at the tomb itself. It's a 7 Cotswold chambered tomb. Really unusual in that it's hidden deep down here in the valley. We don't know why that is. Certainly its satellite tomb is high up on Penmain Burrows. It faces the winter solstice, so that time when things would have been their darkest and most frightening. And these stones here, these are river stones that you can still see. These stones, different in character, like river stones. So we know that the river used to flow above the ground and not far away from the entrance to the tomb. Okay, so I wasn't actually going to come to Cathill Cave, but I found it really hard to walk past without coming up and giving it a quick mention. So here's the entrance. We know it was occupied by hunter-gatherers here on Gower, and in the entrance here they excavated a fine Neolithic hand axe. I've got a replica of one. I'll put it on my table prepared in case you'd like to see it, but it's all been blocked off by this grill. I could come in here when I was a kid. I'm sure some of you might have actually ventured inside, largely because a cave painting was found of a reindeer. Or at least they think it's a cave painting. Some people dispute it. Etched in red ochre into the rock, and the suggestion is that it was done ritually, so somebody would have had to sort of bent backwards and done it with their left arm, so some sort of way of maybe communicating with the animal spirit, or a hunting ritual. Certainly it would have been pretty harsh living here in Neolithic times, and earlier. You know, they found this landscape would have been inhabited by wolves and cave bear, and an extinct sort of form of the Irish deer, which was massive. So yeah, it would have been pretty brutal and harsh. I always wonder about how all this earth is coming from this bit of the entrance here. What is underneath here? Now, we know that bodies were excarnated here, so that means they were kind of picked off by wildlife. The bones were exposed to rot away until they were just bones and not flesh. And then they were interred in Giant's Grave, which is used over, I think it was over 800 years. We'll have to check that, for a long time, certainly. And this entrance directly aligns with the passageway of Giant's Grave. So it's like they've got this symbiotic relationship. You could say it was like arterial, so the bones were then moved from here to the entrance of the tomb, gradually moved up the central passageway and then interred, and it faces the winter solstice, so the darkest, most miserable, frightening time of year, where possibly they weren't even sure if spring would come again. So perhaps something was happening at the entrance to that cave. Certainly again, they found calcite from deep within the cave at the entrance, so maybe it was mixed with the bones in some way. I mean, who knows? But it's just absolutely fascinating to just consider how people were behaving, how people were living within this landscape, and how that's informed who we are today. Okay, so I'm going to take you up to Church Hill, and just to give you some perspective on where we actually are, that's the old gatekeeper's cottage at the top of Greencombe, so about a mile up from Shepherd's, and I'm on this green track that's sort of adjacent. Just through there, through the trees, is the kind of gravel track up to the top of Penmain. So I'm climbing up onto Church Hill. The path's pretty muddy and it's been windy, so lots of fallen trees, but it's not too bad underfoot. And certainly when we get to the top, we'll be on the edges of what was the boundary for the medieval deer park that was here. Just gonna, you can see it curves around through all the wild garlic and the bluebells. So as you can see, the path this time of year, it sort of almost disappears. So in some ways, it's not the best time of year for me to show you Church Hill, because a lot of the remains will be covered over in garlic and summer growth. But I think it's still quite a magical spot, and hopefully I'll get some of that across on camera. Okay, so I'm approaching Church Hill. I'm still walking across the top of what was the boundary of the deer park. Don't know if you can, really like to show you this ash tree, just because it's such a beautiful tree. Of course, ash is so important to the woodland floor. They provide just the sort of cover you need for the bluebells to thrive, and with ash dieback, they're in serious decline and danger. You see the ash tree? It's fantastic. That's one of my favourite trees. So quite concerned for its well-being at the moment, as we're losing a lot of our trees on Gower and they're being felled. You've probably noticed. Certainly as we go down to the Gower Inn, there's a lot. Now, Philippa Grove, who lives in a local farm, she would be walking up here across the fields, and she found, while she was field walking, so just sort of scratching the surface, she found bits of Roman pottery, all sorts of finds, and so she contacted the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust, or GGAT for short, and they came here to excavate the site with, I think, Dr. Eddie Owens, was in charge, history lecturer at Swansea Uni, and they dug 3 trenches. They found a great deal of Neolithic flint, which makes sense because the site is actually directly above Giant's Grave. Certainly the Romans would have noted the significance of the grave and reflected that in their choice of positioning for what was a Roman, well, high status building, hypercost system. So it actually had underfloor heating. So they'd have done that with like a furnace, pumping hot air. There was examples of mosaic, wall plaster. So it was, as I said, a high status building, but not a villa. They dug 3 trenches. Oh look, we're approaching the site. And they also found a great deal of Roman pottery, as you would expect. A penannular brooch, so those round brooches used to sort of secure cloaks. I can show you an example of that. A piece of worked quartz, possibly worked with the jewellery piece in mind, or perhaps some ritual significance. Certainly they found something similar in Old Surgeon's Cave, which is near the waterworks in Greencombe. What they do know is that there was something going on up here. I mean, there's been suggestions of a bathhouse, but the conclusions really, also bearing in mind that there was another lower status building here, was that it was some kind of sanctuary. And the site seems to be quite well connected to Penmain and the sort of religious practices. Certainly there's a satellite tomb in Penmain, another chamber tomb like Giant's Grave, and Giant's Grave is now, although you won't be able to see it, directly below us. Now they did find evidence, sort of big stone balls and things up here as well, so they were obviously using this high point as an advantage, perhaps in the early Iron Age, for marauding groups, or even maybe to keep the Romans at bay initially. From this top part, they also found a middle Stone Age, so very early Mesolithic flint. So certainly fascinating. And all of these sites tend to link together. If we look, there was a medieval farmstead up here later. We can still see evidence of that. I'm going to have to hunt, I'm afraid, for some of the stone. The trenches were pretty much where we're looking now. Oh, and here we are. So you'll notice it's not hugely clear, but look, you can see where, can you see? It's moss-coloured stones, really. Moss-covered, I should say, on top of where the trenches were. Now they have only dug 3 trenches. There could be an awful lot more under here. But I think the best thing about this place is that if you come up here and you haven't got me gabbering on, it's got a real atmosphere. Okay, so I'm standing in front of Tooth Cave. Now I don't know if I mentioned before that Greencombe, Parc les Breus, is very much like a ritual landscape. So it's been used ceremonially, perhaps we could say for religious practices through hundreds, thousands of years. And Tooth Cave is the site of a Bronze Age burial. And there's some very fine finds in there as well, fine bone needles. And I've got illustrations of this if you'd be interested in seeing them after this film. And I've also got, I'd like to read to you, the explanation of the first people that found the cave. I was lucky enough to interview them and also speak to the brother-in-law actually, and sister of the people that were in the cave first. And when they found it, it was very much like a Howard Carter moment. A great discovery. More on that later. Let's go a bit closer. And I'm holding this camera. I'm looking at the floor, okay? It's blocked off, which is a good thing. Because if you're a caver, and certainly there are some amazing caves under this valley, probably why it is so important, and maybe why it is so important ritual is, because these vast caves, one of them called the Cathedral Cave underneath, and this cave, 10th Cave, it's actually got a really steep drop. So if you went in on your own after crawling through this tunnel, you wouldn't be able to get back out, which, to be honest, as I look in to its depths, is not a very nice thought. But incredible to think that Bronze Age people 3,000–4,000 years ago went in here to ritually bury people that really meant something and whom they grieved for, and left special artifacts with them. What were they thinking? That they'd be closer to the ancestors in the bowels of the earth? So I'm leaving Tooth Cave at the top end of the valley. Certainly worth mentioning. There's been quite a few Roman finds, and actually a gold coin was found at the top of this valley in the river by somebody I knew, or know. And on Penwyn Common, over 200 coins were found near a quarry there, Roman coins. Nearly 100 coins in Ilston Quarry, along with a skeleton. What was happening there? Tried to think. And fictionally, local stories always talk about there being a Roman road, perhaps processionally leading to Lecherham, the Roman fort in Lecher, or perhaps to a lost Roman site on Gower. Who knows? Love a bit of magic, mystery, and let's face it, an overactive, perhaps, imagination.